Welcome to the deep dive. For this one, we've gathered quite a bit. Some articles, research papers, listener notes, even that YouTube short some of you mentioned. And we're jumping right into this theory that's been, well, making the rounds. The idea that somehow new Mountain Dew flavors line up with, or maybe even signal, major global tragedies. It sounds pretty wild.
It really does. And our goal today is, to take a really objective look. We want to understand the claims, sure, but also, maybe more importantly, why these kinds of theories catch on. It taps into something deeply human, doesn't it? That need to find patterns, find meaning, especially when things feel kind of chaotic.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack this then. We'll look at the theory, the specific connections people are making, check those against actual timelines from the sources we have, and then get into the fascinating psychology behind it all. Just hearing the basic idea, what immediately jumps out at you.
Well, before we even dive into the specific Mountain Dew claims, there's a really fundamental concept we absolutely have to nail down. It's this difference between correlation and causation. Correlation. That's just observing that two things kind of happen around the same time or move in similar ways. Like, think about ice cream sales and sunscreen sales. They both shoot up in the summer, right?
Right. Hot weather people buy both.
Exactly. They're correlated. There's a statistical link and association. But one doesn't cause the other.
Yeah, you see two lines going up on a graph, but it doesn't mean one pushed the other up.
Precisely. And causation is different. That's when one event directly makes another happen. You flip the switch, the light comes on. There's a clear mechanism, a demonstrable link.
And that's the trap, isn't it? Seeing two things together and just assuming, boom, connection. Like your ice cream example, the sun, the heat, that's the real driver. Or sometimes maybe it's just pure coincidence.
Absolutely. Pure coincidence. And that distinction, it's crucial for looking at this Mountain Dew thing. Finding a flavor launch near a tragedy. Okay, that's proximity. That's at best correlation. It tells you nothing about whether the launch caused it or signaled it. To claim that, you'd need actual concrete evidence showing PepsiCo somehow knew or influenced the event. And that's the core claim we need to examine critically. Got it. Correlation isn't causation. Keep that in mind. Okay, so let's get into the claims themselves. Based on the sources, what's the actual assertion here? That PepsiCo is, timing these releases on purpose? Implying they do beforehand, or maybe even elites are involved? Yeah, that's pretty much the gist. This idea of predictive programming, like they're hiding clues or signals in, soda flavors. And proponents tend to focus on flavors with names that sound, suggestive. Names you can easily link to a disaster if you're already looking for it. And also textbook confirmation bias.
Okay, and they have specific examples, right? Where ones kept coming up in the material we looked at.
Well, the big one, the one you hear a lot, is Mountain Dew Code Red and the 911 attacks. Code Red emergency signal. The timing near 2001.
Right, that name is powerful. Okay, what else?
Then there's Mountain Dew Maui Burst, linked to the awful Maui wildfires.
Right.
The name is obvious, of course. But then they add this layer, claiming DEW actually stands for Directed Energy Weapon.
Whoa, okay, that's another level entirely.
It really is. Then Mountain Dew Pitch Black, that gets linked to sort of vague blackouts, just based on the name sounding kind of dark.
Okay, another name thing, voltage.
Mountain Dew Voltage, linked to the COVID-19 pandemic. The idea being the name suggests like a shock or a major disruption.
And Purple Thunder.
That one's connected to the Ukraine war. Thunder, interpreted as sounds of conflict impact.
Okay. And there were some more recent ones, too?
Yeah, Mountain Dew Star, Spangled, Splash, tied to the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse. The connection is through Francis Scott Key himself, who wrote the anthem referenced in the name.
That takes a bit of a logical leap there. And Flaming Hot.
That one's pretty vague in the sources. They're just linked to general fires or maybe intense events, basically just because the name suggests heat. So yeah, those are the main pairings you see cited by people who believe the theory. And now, obviously the next step is, let's check the facts. Let's actually compare the release dates with the event dates.
Right, this is where we need the solid info, the flavor list, the timelines of the events. What happens when you put them side by side? Let's do the reality check.
Okay, let's walk through them based on the sources. First, Code Red and 911. Code Red came out in May 2001. 9/11 was September 2001. So there's, about 4 months between them?
4 months, okay.
My name is suggestive, sure, but countless other products launched that spring and summer too.
So some proximity, but not exactly lockstep. What about the Maui one, Maui Burst?
Maui Burst and the Maui Wildfires. This one's really clear from the research. Maui Burst was first released, I think, 2019. Became permanent in 2020. The wildfires were August 2023.
Wait, 2019-2020 release, 2023 fires?
That's a 3 to 4 year gap, not months, years.
Okay, that kind of blows that one out of the water.
It really does. And that whole DEW means directed energy weapon thing.
Yeah.
Fact checkers looked into it specifically for the Maui fires. Zero evidence. It's clearly someone looking back years later and trying to force fit a narrative onto an old flavor name. Retrofitting, basically.
Okay, completely debunked. Pitch Black and Blackout.
Pitch Black and a Blackout. This one's tricky because Pitch Black has had multiple releases since 2004. Limited runs, fountain only sometimes. The claim connects it to just a general blackout. But interestingly, the big Northeast blackout of 2003 actually happened before Pitch Black even existed.
Before the first release.
Yeah. And with it popping up sporadically over like 20 years, finding some power outage somewhere while it was available, that's almost bound to happen by chance. It's definitely not a consistent pattern.
Right. Relies on being vague and the timing doesn't really track clearly. Okay. Voltage and COVID.
Voltage and COVID-19. Voltage launched way back in 2008. The pandemic really hit late 2019, early 2020. That's what? 11 or 12-year difference?
12 years. Wow.
Yeah, the correlation there is, well, it's basically non-existent. Pure cherry picking based on a name years later.
Okay, that's not even a stretch. That's just not there. Purple Thunder and Ukraine.
Purple Thunder and the Ukraine War. Now this one, Purple Thunder came out in 2022. The major escalation in Ukraine was February 2022. So the year lines up.
Okay.
And the name Thunder, you could metaphorically link it to conflict, sure. So this is probably the closest temporal match the proponents point to. But you have to see it in context.
Right. One closer match among a lot of misses. Star Spangled Splash and the Bridge.
Star Spangled Splash and the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Sources list this as a summer 2024 flavor, like June to August release. The bridge collapse was March 26, 2024.
So the flavor comes out after the event it's supposedly signaled.
Seems like it, yeah. The connection relies purely on the name referencing the anthem's author. Unless someone argues it was secretly available earlier, which isn't substantiated, the timing doesn't work for signaling.
Doesn't work at all. Okay, last one. Flaming Hot and Fires.
Flaming Hot and Fires. Released around 2021-2022. The claim just vaguely connects it to fires. The sources don't cite any specific major event linked to its release window. It's really just leaning on the name itself, unsubstantiated. So yeah, when you actually line up the dates based on the available information, most of these connections just evaporate. Huge time gaps, coincidental names years later, sometimes the timing is even backward.
It's pretty stark when you lay it out like that. But okay, even with the Purple Thunder one being closer in time, what's the the fundamental issue here? Because this is where it gets really interesting, right?
It absolutely does. It comes down to two main things: sheer numbers and how our brains work. First, the numbers. Think about how many Mountain Dew flavors there actually are. One source we saw, an enthusiast site, tracked like 93 different kinds over the years.
93, that's a lot of dew.
It is a huge pool of different products, often with very distinctive, sometimes kind of dramatic names, hitting the market at various points. Now, flip side, think about the world. Sadly, terrible things happen all the time. Conflicts, disasters, accidents. There's a constant stream of negative global events.
Yeah, unfortunately true.
So you have these two massive independent sets of things happening, a ton of soda flavors being released, and a ton of world events occurring. Just by pure random chance, it's statistically inevitable that sometimes a flavor name will seem relevant to an event that happens roughly around the same time, or even years apart if you're looking hard enough. It's called the denominator problem. The sheer volume of possibilities makes coincidences unavoidable.
Okay. So the theory works by highlighting the few times it looks like a match.
Exactly.
While totally ignoring the hundreds, maybe thousands of combinations where a flavor came out and nothing happened, or a tragedy happened and no relevant flavor was around.
That's it, precisely. That's selection bias. Or cherry picking. You focus only on the data points that seem to support your idea, the hits, and ignore all the misses. And notice how the definition of a significant event can also be pretty flexible, right? Whatever fits the narrative at the moment. So bottom line for this part, the actual evidence for consistent link is incredibly weak. It relies on scattered random overlaps, and there's absolutely zero credible evidence presented in these sources for causation or any kind of intentional signaling by PepsiCo. The connections look like they're built after the fact, by picking and choosing, not by objective analysis.
Okay, so the facts don't line up. The numbers make coincidence almost certain. So why? Why do people find this compelling? What's the human side of this equation?
Yeah, this is where psychology comes in. Our brains are wired to find patterns. It's like an evolutionary advantage, helps us predict things, survive. But sometimes that pattern detector goes into overdrive. It's especially when we're faced with things that are confusing or scary or just random, we start seeing meaningful connections in stuff that's totally unrelated. That tendency is called epiphenia, or patternicity. It's why you see shapes in clouds.
Or faces and toast.
Exactly. Faces in toast. Pareidolia is a form of it. It's a normal brain function, but it can lead us to read way too much into coincidences.
So our brains are trying to impose order on chaos, basically, and sometimes they just invent the order.
Kind of, yeah. And once you think you've spotted a pattern, another bias kicks in. Confirmation bias. You subconsciously start looking for evidence that confirms your suspicion, and you ignore or explain away anything that contradicts it. So if you already kind of distrust big corporations, you're much more likely to notice the apparent Mountain Dew hits and dismiss all the misses as irrelevant.
That makes total sense. You see what you're looking for.
Right. And, sometimes these kinds of theories can also act as coping mechanisms. Think about it. When big, scary things happen, a pandemic, a war, a disaster, the world can feel random and out of control. Believing there's a hidden hand, a secret plan, even a malicious one by elites using soda flavors. It sounds strange, but it can paradoxically feel more comforting than facing pure chaos. It gives you an explanation, a target for anger, a sense of order, even if it's a negative one.
It feels more manageable to be angry at PepsiCo than to grapple with, say, the immense complexities of geopolitics or climate change causing disasters.
Exactly. It simplifies a complex, frightening reality. And remember that DDW means directed energy weapon thing. That's a perfect example of how existing conspiracy ideas just get pasted onto something new and visible like Mountain Dew. Someone sees the acronym, connects it to a totally separate pre-existing theory about secret weapons, and suddenly it's part of the Mountain Dew story. So really, the theory isn't even fundamentally about the soda itself. Mountain Dew is just a big, visible brand with lots of product launches and catchy names. It becomes a convenient screen, a canvas for people to project their existing anxieties, their distrust, and that powerful, innate human drive to find patterns and explanations in a world that often feels random and overwhelming. So wrapping up this deep dive, when you really scrutinize the claims against the evidence of the sources, the Mountain Dew conspiracy theory just doesn't hold water. It seems built on misinterpreting coincidence, amplified by these very understandable, very human psychological tendencies.
So what's the takeaway here for you listening? This isn't just about debunking one specific kind of quirky theory about soda. It's really a fantastic example of how you can approach any intriguing or maybe worrying claim you encounter, especially online these days.
Absolutely. It's about critical thinking tools. When you hear something that sounds extraordinary, pause and ask, is this just correlation, or is there actual proof of causation? Where is this information coming from? Does the source have an agenda? Are they showing the whole picture? Or just the bits that fit their narrative? Are they cherry picking? Are the terms fuzzy or specific?
And maybe the simplest question, could there be a less complicated explanation, like just coincidence, Occam's razor, right?
Exactly. Could it just be chance? And importantly, don't just take a claim, especially a sensational one, at face value. Do a quick search on reputable fact-checking sites. See what established sources say.
It's about cultivating that habit of, let's call it healthy skepticism. Not just shutting everything down, but being curious, asking questions, demanding evidence, and using reason to figure things out.
For sure. And look, that desire to find patterns, to find explanations for why things happen, especially difficult things,
Yeah.
that's completely natural. It's human. But latching onto theories that aren't backed by solid evidence, well, it might feel like an answer, but it doesn't really lead to genuine understanding.
Yeah, this whole deep dive really underscores how vital media literacy is today, doesn't it? Being able to critically look at information, understand why certain stories gain traction, even if they're flimsy, and tell the difference between a real connection and just our pattern-seeking brains doing their thing. It's not just helpful, it feels essential for making sense of things. So maybe think about it. What patterns are you noticing out there, and how are you checking if they're real?